My name is Eliza Leone. I am the registered dietitian that works for Restaurant Associates. We do the food service on the HMS campus. So we do all of the cafes on campus as well as catering too. So we are making today, this is a blackberry early summer salad. So blackberries are in season right now, as well as arugula and kale. These are the leafy greens that we're using. These, of course, are found year round, but the greens are really in season this time of year. We've also got lots of other delicious ingredients here. We have chickpeas, we have quinoa, and the quinoa we're making in two ways, which I'll show you. I'll explain a bit more. We're making some croutons. We're making two dressings. So one of the dressings is an emulsified dressing. It uses egg yolk as the emulsifier, and I'll show you that process and explain how that works. And the other dressing is just a basic balsamic vinaigrette. So if you are a little uncomfortable with the raw egg yolk, then no need to make that. You can just do the honey balsamic vinaigrette instead. So that said, I'm going to talk a bit about some safety items right off the top. So like I said, we are using a raw egg yolk. There is always a bit of a risk with egg yolk. They always say don't eat raw cookie dough, that kind of stuff. But there are so many different kinds of dressings and sauces that use raw egg yolk, and even cocktails use raw egg white and shake it to make a foam on top. So raw egg is used in a lot of different ways, and they say that you shouldn't eat it, but we've eaten worse. Our stomachs are strong. But if it skeeves you out, I understand, and no need to do it. If you are pregnant, then I would recommend not using that raw egg, just to be safe. A few other things. So always be sure before we start the classes that you have washed all of your produce items. That includes the kale, the arugula, your blackberries, even the lemon. Even though we're not going to be eating the lemon rind, we're going to be cutting through the lemon rind. So any bacteria on the outside could go all the way through the inside of the lemon. So it's always safer to just wash it. Why not? And also, if you've got your canned chickpeas, you want to drain those and rinse those as well before we start. Also, something else that we mentioned in every class, knife. A sharp knife is actually safer than a dull knife. A dull knife doesn't get a very good grip on the food, and it can slip and cut your finger. So you always want to make sure you have a nice sharp knife. And a little tip at the top of the class, the most ergonomic way to hold your knife is to actually pinch with your thumb and pointer finger, pinch the top of the blade here, and hold the rest of the handle with the rest of your fingers. This is actually more ergonomic because the knife is in line with your arm, rather than turning your arm at an angle and trying to, that hurts your wrist after a while. So if you can straighten out your arm a little bit, it's much more ergonomic and comfortable for your wrist if you're chopping a lot of things. Let's see, I think that's about it. So the plan of work for our class, the plan of work is the process in which we are making this recipe, the process by which we're following these instructions. So we are first going to start with the items that take the longest to cook. So that means our roasted chickpeas and our croutons are going in the oven first. Then we're going to make our quinoa. We're going to cook it just like you do with rice. You're just going to add water in there and let it soak up all the water. And then we're going to cook it a different way. So that is going to the side. And then we're going to make chopped quinoa, which I'll show you. It's going to be a nice crunchy topping. So then we're going to make the two salad dressings. And this is going to be a good test to see if your creamy salad dressing is truly emulsified, because after we make the salad dressings, we're going to let them sit for a little bit. And it shouldn't separate, but you'll see how the other dressing will separate. We'll talk about that when we get there. And then we're going to prep the remainder of our ingredients, like the kale and the pistachios and all that, and then we assemble. All right, we're going to first get started with our chickpeas. What I'm going to do to save some dishes is to bring my sheet pan over here, and I'm just going to toss my chickpeas right onto this sheet pan and add my oil and salt and pepper. straight on top, and then I'll mix it around. You could toss this in a separate bowl if you wanted to, if you'd rather. I'm just using a pinch of salt and pepper each. I'm not measuring, but if you'd like to measure, what we had in the recipe was 1.5 cups of chickpeas, 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of canola oil. So I'm gonna go get canola. All right, and I'm just gonna drizzle the canola a little bit and then use a spoon to just toss it right on the sheet pan. And then we're gonna do basically the same thing with the croutons. So we're gonna be, I'm putting them both on the same sheet pan, again, just to save dirty dishes. We're not making like a huge batch of either of these. So unless you're using a pretty small sheet pan, you should be able to fit them both on one sheet pan. So we're gonna keep the chickpeas to one side. We're gonna make sure they're in a single layer, because if they're laying on top of each other, then they're not gonna equally be exposed to the heat. So we've got those in a single layer. And now I'm gonna just set this sheet pan aside and we're gonna make our croutons. So I've got just 2 slices of regular old wheat bread, nothing special. You can use whatever kind of bread you like. And I'm gonna cut this into cubes. So the first way to do that is to cut strips. And these are about 1 inch thick. You can cut them smaller if you like. Obviously, these are gonna be nice and crunchy when they come out of the oven. So cut them as small as you'd like them to be. So I cut strips one way, and then I'm gonna cut, I turned it 45 degrees and I'm cutting the other way to make cubes. Now we've got just cubed bread here. So I'm gonna put this on the sheet pan on the other side where it was empty. And we're gonna do the same exact thing. We're gonna drizzle our oil and salt and pepper. So drizzle the oil. And the recipe called for 1 tablespoon of oil, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/8 of pepper. If you'd like to follow that. Yeah.
So Jackie asked, is it better if the bread is a little stale at the start?
Honestly, that is a great way to use stale bread. That would be a great way to like reduce your food waste, but it's not necessary. I truthfully don't know if it actually comes out better or not, because either way, you're putting it in the oven and it's getting nice and crunchy and toasty anyway. So I would say if you have stale bread, definitely use it to make croutons, because that's great, or to make breadcrumbs or something like that. But you don't have to like, you know, leave your bread out overnight so it gets stale in order to make croutons. I do know that if you ever make like a panzanella salad, that's a salad where you put big chunks of stale bread and mix it in with the other, you know, vegetables. And that they do prefer stale bread because it gives it a bit more texture, because you're not like toasting it. So it kind of keeps it like a little bit heartier even after it's absorbed the liquids from the vegetables. But with this method of making croutons, you definitely don't have to use stale bread. But good question. I know a lot of people do that. So it's just that making croutons is a great way to use your bread when it goes stale. So I've got 1/2 chickpeas, 1/2 croutons. The oven is preheated to 350. So I'm gonna go throw this in the oven right now. So I'll be right back. All right, I think you can still hear me even though I'm not in front of you. So, all right, I set the timer for 10 minutes, but I'll remind you to check back on it. So don't worry about the timer. All right, so that's the part that takes the longest. So we've got that in the oven now. What we're gonna do at this point is make our quinoa. So I'm gonna bring over this induction burner here. And I'm gonna turn this on to high. And sometimes this induction burner causes a weird audio feedback, so let me know if my audio gets weird. But I'm gonna be adding my quinoa in here. So this is 1 cup of quinoa, and this is tricolor quinoa. Just makes it look a little bit nicer when it's got some different colors. And I've got 1 3/4 cups of water. You can also use stock if you'd prefer. So I'm putting them both in at the same time, and I'm just gonna let that come to a boil. So while that's coming to a boil, I wanted to show you all, I have a slide. I wanted to see if maybe you have seen this image before. This is the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate. Hopefully my screen is showing. This is a really helpful guide. This was developed by the School of Public Health, so our neighbor over here. And this is a really helpful guide for how to like model all of your meals after this. You may, if you've ever seen the USDA My Plate, this is kind of like a, I don't know, a little bit of a better version than USDA My Plate, because My Plate has dairy as an essential food group, and the vegetables and fruits are the same size, and there's no healthy oil on the My Plate image. So this one shows you that vegetables are really the biggest portion of your plate. Then you've got fruits that take up a little bit as well. You have healthy protein, which if we're looking at our meal today, the healthy protein category includes the Parmesan cheese and the dressing. It includes the egg in the dressing. It includes the goat cheese that we're putting on top, the pistachios as well, the chickpeas. So we've got a lot of healthy plant-forward or dairy-based proteins here. And of course, the whole grain is the quinoa. And with the healthy oils, I think that's such an important addition to this picture, because, you know, way back when, you know, the low fat diet has kind of become not a thing anymore, because we've now seen how important fats are. Some fats are in our diet. So that's why there's this healthy fat section here. So unsaturated fats, that's monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, any kind of oil that's liquid at room temperature. Those would count as healthy oil. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And now you can see that my quinoa is boiling. So what I'm actually going to do is move this to another induction burner. I'm going to put it over there, put it on low simmer, and put a lid on it and check on it in about 10 to 15 minutes. So you can do that as well. I'm moving it to the side because I want to use the burner that you're looking at to show you how to pop quinoa. So I've got this quinoa on low, we've got the lid on, and we'll check back in a little bit.
Eliza,
Okay,
so
now I'm back.
So
Yes.
one of them has a question. Do you have any recommendation for the good tool that you use to rinse the quinoa?
To rinse the quinoa,
Yeah.
definitely, you're talking about rinsing before cooking, I assume. That, I mean, I guess either way, because quinoa is so small, if you have like a sieve instead of a strainer or a colander, sieves tend to have like, they're, you know, very fine. The holes are much smaller. So it's better to, it will keep the quinoa in, and it doesn't let the water, or it doesn't let the quinoa fall through, only the water. It's kind of the consistency of like, people use that same tool for like dusting powdered sugar on top of desserts and stuff. So that's how fine that is. It's super, super fine. So that would be really helpful for something like this.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I always find like I lose half of it down the drain.
I
So
know.
I need
It's
a
kind of
smaller
annoying
mesh.
yes. A little annoying to have to buy another tool, but yeah, it is helpful. Helpful in more than one way. Like I said, if you make desserts, then you can put powdered sugar on stuff. You can sift your flour, you can use that for lots of different things. All right, so this is just dry quinoa, the same exact thing that we've put into the other pot, but this time we're not adding liquid and we're gonna pop it. So I've got this on like a medium high, and this pan is dry. There's nothing else, there's no oil or anything in here. And this is just gonna take a few minutes. So you can see right now how light colored those lighter grains are. These are gonna be getting toasted. And so quinoa, if you've ever looked closely at it when it's cooked, you can see that it kind of has like a swirly inside. It's kind of like coiled up. So what this is doing when you pop it is it's like any of the moisture that's inside of this grain, it evaporates and it creates like a force that opens up the grain and it cracks open that outer shell. So it's, just like making popcorn, but this is not gonna look like popcorn. It's gonna still be very, very small, but, and it doesn't make like a huge popping sound like popcorn does. Instead, it's a little bit more like Rice Krispie treats or Rice Krispies when you put milk in the cereal, that like crackling sound. That's what this sounds like when you pop it. So this is definitely an optional addition to this salad, but it's a fun new thing to try. You can also do this same practice with wild rice. Wild rice does the same thing and it pops open and looks like Rice Krispies. That's how they make puffed rice. So if quinoa is not your thing, if you're using rice in this instead, then wild rice specifically also pops with this same practice. So you'll see that I'm moving this around. I'm trying to prevent it from being burned. I can see that it's starting to get a little bit lightly browned. And you can definitely smell it too. You can smell the like toasted flavor or aroma rather than flavor. But what this does is it adds a toasted flavor to the dish. So it's just starting to make little crackling sounds. I don't know if you'll be able to hear, but you can kind of see, I wonder if the camera shows. Yeah, you can see some of the little pieces are kind of like moving around as they're popping. Yeah, it's definitely starting to crackle. So you don't want to go too long. Really what you want to go as long as it takes for the most of the crackling to start to subside, while also keeping an eye on the color. You don't want it to burn. And I'm only doing a tiny bit of this because it's really just a little garnish. When the photo that you all saw of this recipe, when I sent out the recipe and that like the first page of the document that has like the tips and the equipment list and all that stuff, it has the photo of this recipe. When I first assembled this, when I was testing it, I forgot to put these on. And I took all the photos and then I remembered that I forgot the popped quinoa and I was like, it doesn't need it. But I sprinkled it on top and I was like, oh, it looks so much nicer. So I had to go back and take more photos. So it really does make a difference with the like visual appeal of this recipe. So I think I'm gonna call it. You can see that this is definitely darker and it's still making some little crackling sounds, but I didn't want it to burn. So that's why I'm gonna stop here. But it's nice and toasty and it's gonna be a nice crunchy topping. So I'm gonna set this aside until it's time to use it. So at this point, I'm gonna move this out of the way and I'm gonna go and check on the croutons. The croutons don't take as long to cook as the chickpeas do. So I wanna be sure that those are not gonna burn. My oven here, of course, I'm not in your average kitchen, so the oven that I use is a bit more high powered. But I encourage you to also check on your croutons at this point too. So I am gonna go do that. Be right back. How's everybody doing so far at home? Hope everybody's doing okay. Ooh, these croutons look good. All right, so I'm coming back around. I'm going to show you my croutons, and I'm going to put the chickpeas back in. But this is what the croutons look like. Nice and toasty. I don't know if you can hear the crunchiness. Definitely crunchy. These look awesome. So I'm just going to scoop these out of this pan into another bowl, and I'm going to put the chickpeas back in because they're not ready just yet. You can tell if your chickpeas are ready or not by looking at the color of it. So the outside of the chickpeas at this point are probably starting to get a little bit darker brown, and they're looking like drier. But if the inside is still like a, light beige color, then you still have more cooking to do. So you can see some of them are not quite darkened yet. So I'm gonna go put these back in probably for another 10 minutes. That's what I'll set my alarm for. All right. So let's do a time check. All right, we're looking good. Any questions or anything right now? Let me know if there's anything. All right, so now we're gonna move on to our dressing. So I'm just gonna clean up a little bit here and bring my dressing ingredients over. So like I said, we're making two dressings. One of them is emulsified and the other is not. Emulsification is the process of combining the oil and the like vinegar or lemon juice or whatever like water-based liquid you have in your dressing, combining them permanently. So at least that's what we're doing with our egg yolk. That's what that's going to do for us. So the first dressing we're going to make is the honey balsamic, which is not emulsified. And I'm going to show you just like a quick and easy way to make it, to put all of the ingredients into a container with a tight fitting lid, and then you just shake it. You don't even need to whisk it. It's super easy. And if you can put it in your Tupperware that you're going to use for storage, then that's one less dish to have to wash. All right. So we're starting here with the balsamic vinaigrette, or vinegar rather. This is a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. I've got 3/4 of a cup of olive oil. This is extra virgin olive oil, which is the best kind to use for dressings or anything that's cold. And then I've got 1 tablespoon of honey here as well. So I'm just going to scoop that out. That's always a little tricky to get out of the container. So you can just squeeze it straight into your Tupperware. That makes it easier. All right. And the only other ingredients we're putting in here are salt and pepper. I'm just trying to get some more of that honey off of the spoon here. All right. And I'm just doing a pinch of salt and pepper. You can always add more. You can't take away. A little pinch. And then I'm putting my lid on tight, making sure it's nice and tight. And then just shake it up. And because this dressing is not going to be emulsified, all you have to do is shake it until it's combined, which takes no time at all. So this will separate because this is just a normal vinaigrette. Egg yolk is a very well-known emulsifier, but also a plant-based version of an emulsifier is mustard. So if you wanted to put like Dijon mustard in this, or mustard, whole grain mustard, if you can shake that really, really hard for kind of a little bit of a long time, it might emulsify. But what I'm going to show you with the egg yolk, this is really the way to guarantee that you will end up with an emulsified dressing. All right, so I'm gonna put this aside. Like I said, right now it looks fine, but after this sits for a while, it's gonna separate, just like any other dressing. So I'm gonna put it to the side and you'll see how that separates. And I'm gonna grab a mixing bowl for this next dressing. Okay. So everybody ready? Let me know if you're not at this point yet, because it's there's like a crucial moment that I don't want you to miss. Hopefully everybody's ready to make this dressing. Okay, let me know.
I'm ready.
Bev, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with just cutting the lemon in half. We're going to use about like half of the lemon, depending on how juicy it is. You can also like roll your lemon. Probably better if you do that before you cut it, but you can roll it a little bit to soften it up, make it easier to squeeze the juice out. Okay, so that's going to be ready to go. Then we've got a garlic clove. We only need a small garlic clove, that's it. And we're going to be making a paste, a garlic paste, which is a fun culinary trick. So I'm just going to cut off that end, that root end, and we're going to mince this up. So I got my root end removed. And to mince, you're going to first slice it, and definitely helpful to keep the tip of your knife down and just rock your knife down from there. So I'm slicing this garlic first, putting it into a little pile, and then I'm just going to start chopping back and forth. And as necessary, put it back into a little pile again. By keeping the tip of your knife down and just rocking the knife back and forth, you're helping yourself in a few different ways. One way is that you're making it easier for yourself. You're taking out, you're reducing your effort, and you're doing that by like letting like the momentum of rocking the knife help increase your force, basically. If you were lifting your knife and just chopping like that, it doesn't really give the same, you can't go as fast, you don't have the same amount of like force behind it. So rocking your knife really, really helps. Especially with something like this where you're going to be going over and over and over. So we're mincing this garlic nice and small. And then comes the paste part. So we could stop here and just put this minced garlic, these chunks of garlic, even though they're small, they're still garlic chunks, in the vinegar, in the dressing. And then when you eat your salad, you're going to get some chunks of garlic. If that's okay with you, you could stop here. But we're going to do a fun trick to make a garlic paste, and we're going to use a little bit of food science to do that. So grab a pinch of salt and sprinkle it on top of the garlic. It is going to be like a little heavier on the salt than you would think you need for this kind of thing, but that's because we are encouraging this to go through the process of osmosis. So adding salt to the garlic, the garlic wants to balance out the sodium on the outside and bring it on the inside, and wants to bring the moisture from the inside to the outside. So it's pushing its moisture out, which helps to soften the garlic up. So since we've got the salt on there, what you're going to do is put your fingers on the non-sharp side of the blade and lay it flat down and just scrape. And you're going to put it back into a little pile, scrape it again. You can scrape it a few times. And we're going to do this repetitively. You can keep scraping it, put it back in a pile again, scrape it again, So what we're doing is helping to mix the salt into the garlic, and we're also encouraging that liquid to come out of the garlic, which makes it softer and makes it into a paste. So you'll definitely see, you want to be using a decent amount of pressure here. Takes a few times to, a few like swipes to actually figure out like what's the right amount of pressure to use. But you're definitely, you should be seeing some liquid coming out of that garlic. And basically at this point, my garlic is spreadable. It's not really individual pieces anymore. Now it's just one big paste. So I'll show you up close. Up close, you can still see some individual pieces, but it's really very like squishable. It's gonna be a lot like wetter than it was before. So the benefit of this in this dressing is to help it be fully combined. Rather than getting individual pieces of garlic in your dressing, you're getting these little teeny tiny pieces of garlic in this paste, which are going to be really well mixed into the whole dressing. All right. So I'm going to put my garlic paste to the side. Now comes the egg yolk part. So we're about to handle the raw egg. So you're going to want to wash your hands after this. Make sure you don't get raw egg all over everything else you touch. We're going to just grab like an empty bowl. You can use a bowl that's already dirty. It doesn't matter, because what we're going to do is crack our egg on a flat surface, not on the edge. On the flat surface. Oh, my chickpeas are going off. Let me go check on the chickpeas. You should check on yours too if you haven't already. And we'll come right back to the egg yolk. Sorry for the buzzing. Ooh, these are looking great. I think these are done. So like I said, my oven is a bit more high powered. It's got a fan in there and everything. So mine are looking very crunchy. Hopefully you can hear them rolling around on this sheet pan. That gives you an idea of how dry they are and how lightweight they are. So these are good to go. I want to show you like up close. You can see they've kind of split open, and on the inside of the cracks, they're nice and dry. So that's how you know they're crunchy, they're ready to go. So I'm going to set my chickpeas aside until it's time. I'm also going to check on the quinoa right now too. So go and look at your quinoa, give it a mix. Might be time to turn it off even. All right, let me use this. So I'm going to go stir my quinoa. Yeah, this is looking done also. Awesome. So I'm going to turn that off and I'll come over and show you all. So here's the quinoa. So when you see cooked quinoa, I want to get it to focus if I can. The steam is making it difficult. You can see it's bigger, obviously, because it's soaked in all the liquid, but it's like uncoiled, basically. Like there are little pieces, this little piece that's like shaped like a C, that's like a part of the grain that got detached. So it's uncoiled, nice and soft, ready to be eaten. So the quinoa is good to go as well. How's everybody's quinoa and chickpeas at home? We still have time, so it's okay if they're not done yet. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. So, okay, we're moving on to the egg. Let us know if you're not there yet. But we're going to be getting the egg yolk from the egg white. We're separating those two. So what we're going to do is crack the egg on the flat surface and really do our best to get 2 equal sized halves of the shell. And then you put it over the bowl and you let the egg white drip in while you pour the yolk back and forth. So I'm gonna, like I said, on a flat surface instead of on the edge of a bowl. That gives you a bit more control. So I've got this indentation here, put my thumbs in there and try and make two halves. It's not very even, but that's all right. Okay, so I'm holding the yolk in one half. I'm letting the white drip out into my bowl. Oh, my yolk just broke, but that's all right. What matters is that the yolk was separated from the white before it broke. So I'm gonna pour my broken yolk into a bowl. And now I'm just gonna discard this and I'm gonna change my gloves, but I would recommend you wash your hands at home to prevent cross-contamination around your kitchen with the other things you're about to touch. So my broken yolk is sitting in this bowl now, so it looks great. So egg yolk itself is actually an emulsification. So egg yolks have a combination of water and fat and carbohydrates. So the fact that those are all coexisting in the egg yolk is kind of a cool thing. It's like a natural emulsification. So that's a part of what makes this so helpful when we're doing this, using it to emulsify a whole salad dressing. All right, so we've got our egg yolk in the bowl. And the next thing we're gonna do here is add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, which is roughly half of a lemon. So I'm gonna use a juicer to prevent my, any seeds from falling into here. And I'm just eyeballing it. So it really is, it's okay if it's not measured out exactly, just like I said. Although with salad dressings, a traditional, that looks like it might not have been enough. So I think I'm gonna add a little bit more. A traditional vinaigrette, the ratio of acid to oil, so the acid would be vinegar or lemon juice. The ratio of acid to oil is 1 to 3. So that's why with our previous, with the balsamic vinaigrette, okay, I'm gonna stop there. I don't wanna do too much. With the balsamic vinaigrette, we did a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar and 3/4 of a cup of oil. So that's the proper ratio. If you're taking a culinary class and stuff, a chef would always tell you that. However, I do say that do it based on taste, just like anything else. I am obsessed with lemon juice, so I add that to everything. My dressings would probably be 50-50 lemon juice to olive oil. All right, so we've got our lemon juice in here, and I'm also gonna add the garlic paste. All right, so I'm scooping that right inside. I'm gonna grab my whisk and just whisk that up real quick. And then comes the real trick. All right, so everything is combined so far. And now I've got mixed canola oil and olive oil. So it's like a lighter color than normal olive oil. The reason I mixed them is because when I was writing this recipe, if we used just olive oil, it was too strong of its flavor. So we cut it with canola oil. So the magic trick to make this become an emulsified dressing is to slowly drizzle your oil in while whisking. So what I'm gonna do is I have a big bowl here, so I'm gonna push it up against myself, and I'm gonna hold this bowl with the olive oil. I'm holding the olive oil bowl and I'm holding the mixing bowl with the same hand. And I'm putting my whisk in my other hand because I have to whisk while I'm very slowly pouring in that oil. And I'm holding it against me because that just helps me stabilize the bowl. If you have a nice heavy bowl, then you might not have to do that. But I'm really just pouring a tiny bit at a time. So I'm pouring a little bit right now, whisking it all in. I'm doing a little bit more. A little more. And whisking the whole time. So you're definitely using your whisking muscles here. A little more. If you were making this dressing, sometimes they say to make dressings in food processors because you can slowly drizzle in the olive oil through the top while the food processor is going. So that is a good trick. A little bit more. So I've probably done at this point like 2/3 of the oil. Just add a little more. A little more again. So we're doing a little bit at a time because we don't want to overwhelm this really delicate emulsification process. If we dumped all the oil in and then started whisking, it's possible you might end up with it being emulsified if you whisk really, really hard for a long time. But it's a safer bet if you just do it a bit at a time. All right, I'm almost done with my oil. All right, last bit, there we go. So what we end up with is a dressing that's even thicker than the oil or the egg yolk or the lemon juice is individually. That emulsification process thickens up this dressing. And what's cool about the garlic paste is like, you can maybe see some little pieces of garlic in here, but not really. So this is a nice emulsified dressing. So we're gonna set this aside. My time here. The only thing we need to add still is a little bit of pepper if you'd like. You can also add a little bit of salt and give it a taste test. You always want to taste test. Make sure you like it. All right, I'm gonna grab a spoon so I can taste test. Yeah, it's super good. I think that extra bit of lemon juice that I added was exactly to my liking. Perfect.
Quick question.
Cynthia.
Did you already add the Parmesan? Did you add the Parmesan yet, or did I miss it?
Thank you very much. Nope, you did not. The Parmesan goes in after all of the emulsification stuff. So we can dump that in now. Thank you for reminding me. So I used grated Parmesan, not shredded. So it's just the little pieces, not like stringy pieces. If you had only shredded Parmesan, you can just give it a quick chop and like mince up that Parmesan. So that makes it a bit more like lumpy a little bit, but it also gives it a lot more flavor. So yeah, this is like, you can see how thick this is. So you're gonna see when we set this aside, if the emulsification process was done correctly, this will not separate compared to our other dressing, which has already separated. So you see the difference there. All right. So at this point, all we have left to do is just prep the remaining ingredients and then we assemble everything. And if you haven't finished up your quinoa or your chickpeas or your croutons yet, here's your reminder to go check on that. And I'm gonna bring over some other ingredients for us to prep. All right. Okay. So I mentioned that we're using two kinds of greens today. We are using my favorite kind of green, which is Tuscan kale, also called dinosaur kale, also called lacinato kale, lots of different names for it. But this obviously looks very different than curly kale, if you've seen that. It's called dinosaur kale because it like looks like dinosaur skin, which is kind of funny. But it's definitely like, it's got bumps and stuff, but curly kale is, I feel like it's way more difficult to manage because it's just kind of all over the place and super like big and fluffy. And this is way more manageable. And I like the color better, and it's also not as bitter as curly kale. It's easier to work with because it's a bit softer. It's still very hearty, but it's a bit softer than the curly kale. So I'm going to show you a trick. You can, of course, buy kale already prepped if you would like, but Tuscan kale often doesn't come already prepped. So what we're going to do is pull the leaves off the stem. The stem is super thick and, you know, you can eat it, of course you can, but it's just really tough. So I prefer, and most people prefer, to pull the leaf off. So what I'm doing is I folded the leaf around the stem here, and I'm pulling it, I'm gonna keep under the camera, pulling the leaf off the stem, but not too far, don't have to go too far, just enough so I can put loop my fingers around, hold on to the stem, and slide the leaf right off the stem. That's a super quick and easy food prep trick. This works best for kale that is nice and firm. If it's gotten a little bit wilty in your fridge, or if you grow kale in your garden, or you've gotten, you know, fresh baby kale that's kind of tender, it might rip when you do this. It might not really work, but most kale that you find in the store, it will work just fine. So we're ripping the leaves off, again, ripping a little bit, just enough to get your finger around, hold on to the stem, and pull it right off. If you end up with a little bit of the stem still left at the end, you can just fold the leaf in half and pull that stem off. And I'm just putting all of the leaves that I've pulled already, I'm putting them into a pile, just like stacking them on top of each other. And I'm only using a small bunch of kale right now because I'm only making enough for one person. I'm not making the 4 servings, but you can do this same process for as much of the kale as you have. Kale is also, it's great for salads. It's also great for sauteing. It's great for throwing into pasta. It's great for putting it in the freezer and then putting it in a smoothie. Lots of different options for kale. All right, so I've piled it up here on top of itself, and I'm taking the end and I'm curling it up. We're basically going to be doing, you may have done this process before with something like basil, where you've rolled it up and then you slice it into thin ribbons to chiffonade the basil. We're basically doing that, but on a bigger scale. So we're cutting the kale into thin ribbons. You don't have to do it this way. You can choose to tear it up by your hand or just chop it, rough chop, whatever you like. But so I've got my kale, it's swirled up basically. And I'm gonna go at an angle. So the coil is right here, and I'm gonna cut at an angle. And I wanna cut really thin because these pieces are gonna be long. So super thin. And then once I get down to the end, I'm gonna cut it down lengthwise to make sure those pieces are not too long for my salad. This crunchy sound when cutting kale is like one of the most satisfying sounds to me. All right, so now that this is all cut, I'm just gonna give it like 1 or 2 lengthwise cuts. Make sure it's not too long. And now we've got these beautiful little short ribbons. So it's perfect for a salad. I love little pieces in a salad. If the lettuce is too big, it like messes with the experience, I think. So what we're gonna do, so we're getting close to the end here. I'm gonna throw this in a bowl. And I'm gonna use the little bit of lemon juice I have left to just squeeze it over the top of the kale. It helps to soften it up a bit more. Truthfully, I don't do this step when I make a salad at home with kale, but if you have not used kale before, or if you find that it's a bit too tough, then this is a good way to make it more palatable to you. The acid in the lemon juice helps to, you know, soften up the tough kale. So I'm gonna set that aside. We've got just a few more ingredients here to prep. So that includes our blackberries. What I'm gonna do, so you all saw in the picture of this salad, they were cut lengthwise. It just makes them look nicer, I think. It kind of reveals another layer of texture and colors in the salad. So hold on to that blackberry and just slice it lengthwise down the middle. And now, instead of it just being black, now you've got some other colors in here too. So kind of fun. I'm gonna cut a few of these lengthwise. Anyone who has attended these classes before, you know that I'm all about a variety of colors and textures and flavors and anything you can do to make your meal more interesting and varied in all of those ways, you're gonna affect your overall satisfaction of the meal. So this meal is gonna be very physically satisfying because of the protein that we have in the quinoa, in the wheat bread that we use for the croutons, in the chickpeas, the cheeses that we're using, the egg yolk in the dressing. Also going to be very satisfying because of the fiber in every one of these ingredients, except maybe the cheese. Everything else has really good fiber content. Any kind of plant, all plants give you fiber, which helps keep you full. Got pistachios here. You can leave your pistachios whole or you can chop them. I'm going to chop them because I also like, when I make a salad, I like to try and get like every bite to have representation from every ingredient. Sometimes it's hard to do, but it's easier to do when you chop up your ingredients into smaller pieces. All right, so I've got my chopped cutting board. Is starting to look a little messy, but that's all right. Chopped pistachios. I've also got goat cheese here. We chose goat cheese because this is a really good, like tangy, soft cheese that's easy to crumble on top. And I'm gonna leave it as is for now. And when I'm assembling the salad, I'm gonna crumble it all on top. So I'm gonna grab my plate. Time to assemble. We've got lots of ingredients to remember here. So the arugula, you'll note that I didn't add that to the kale when I tossed it with the lemon juice because arugula is very tender. This arugula you don't really want to combine with any kind of acid or dressing until it's time to eat. However, kale, it's good to add a little bit of acid beforehand. All right, so I'm putting some kale first. I'm gonna do some arugula on top of that. Arugula is also a really easy, if you're looking for like something easy to add to your meals, you don't need to prep arugula at all. You buy it in those containers where it's already pre-washed and it's already small as long as you're getting baby arugula, and you don't have to chop it, you don't have to do anything. You just take it out of the bag and put it on your plate. So we've got the two kinds of greens here. Got my quinoa I'm going to put on top here. And it's definitely worth the effort to make your dish look nice because it, like I said, it affects your enjoyment of the meal. You could have all of these ingredients blended up into a brown smoothie. You're not going to enjoy that the same way as you would this like really interesting, layered, textured meal. So it's not only about flavor. I'm adding the chickpeas now. These are going to like kind of tumble around the plate because they're rolling all over the place. These are a really good crunchy topping. And let's see, I think I'll do croutons next. I've got my croutons. Roasted chickpeas are one of my favorites. You can add any kind of spices like za'atar spice or shawarma spice is one of my favorites. Even just, you know, garlic powder, onion powder, things like that. It's so delicious to have roasted chickpeas on your meal. All right, here we go with the blackberries. I'm just gonna scatter those around. There's a noise in here and I don't know what it is. Ooh. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna finish this up, but apparently there's an emergency in the building. So we've got goat cheese, we've got our pistachios. I have the popped quinoa as well. It looks super nice. I wish this thing would stop. I'm sorry. Drizzling my salad dressing, and we're all done here. I don't think I missed anything. I think I got it all. Yeah, there we go. So you can do both dressings or just one. I guess that's my signal. So here's the beautiful salad. At least it's 6:33. I'm gonna end it here because there's an alarm going on. I'm sorry. Kristen, if you want to stay on and answer any questions or let me know if there are any questions, but I think I'm gonna jump off.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna go outside. Hopefully everything's okay. Enjoy
Be
your
safe.
salad.
Be safe.
Thank you. Thank you. It looks great.
Thank you. It looks
Thank you
fabulous.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.